Well, next, sexual misconduct in the country's largest air traffic control center. Now, this man says he was a target. Did a government plan to promote sexual equality backfire? Bob Brown has the story after this.
Sexual harassment by air traffic controllers. It got so bad, the government tried an experiment. A role reversal, where the men became the sex objects. You won't believe what happens when the tables are turned. When 2020 continues after this from our ABC stations. 2020 continues from Los Angeles. Once again, Barbara Walters.
It was the notorious tailhook scandal that brought the practice of the sex gauntlet out in the open. Military women forced to walk between rows of drunken Navy and Marine aviators were groped and fondled as they went. Well, now it seems that that kind of behavior may be more common than you think. Last week, a lawsuit was filed that claimed similar sexual harassment in a most unexpected setting. As Bob Brown found out, it was called sensitivity training, but it may have become as offensive as the behavior it was designed to correct.
This is the busiest air traffic control center in the U.S., the Chicago Center. In the late 80s and early 90s, it became one of the focal points of a new training program by the FAA. The program had nothing to do with handling air traffic. It had everything to do with addressing complaints from women and minorities throughout the agency. They said their lives were often made miserable as they tried to break into an area of employment that was traditionally dominated by white males. In 1988, a Congressional Subcommittee investigated those charges, and one of the women who testified was O'Hare controller Olivette Smith.
So I'm sitting there working very heavy traffic, and all of a sudden I feel a hand, not on my thigh, right in my crotch. In an instant, I had to make an instant decision. Should I address this male and try to fight him off, or should I continue to work airplanes? I chose to work the airplanes.
This particular trainer, he started yelling obscenities, critiquing me using four-letter words. Bitch, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You know, you women, you don't belong here. And I said something to the supervisor, and the comment that I got back was, he didn't mean any harm.
In a strongly worded report, the Congressional Subcommittee recommended that the FAA take action to change that work environment. So the agency hired experts to create 3-day sensitivity training workshops. Some women told the experts they couldn't avoid occasional episodes of harassment even when they walked down this aisle on the way to their jobs. Diana Mocha compared the aisle to a gauntlet.
I walk through a gauntlet every day, and that's down the row. Comments are made. Sometimes it's just looks, but it's a very intimidating situation.
One day a woman had on a short skirt. She's very attractive, and these two guys that I work with saw her coming and purposely stretched their cords opposite directions across the two aisles so that when this woman approached, she would have to step over the two cords to pass through our area. And I thought, that's no big deal. They're just being funny.
It was because men like Tom Reisel sometimes didn't think twice about things like that one element of the new FAA workshops involved positioning women along 2 rows of chairs and having the men walk between them one by one. The idea was to have the men experience what it was like to hear suggestive remarks or receive unwelcome touches. But in a $300,000 lawsuit filed last week, one man claims that exercise and role reversal went much too far. The plaintiff is air traffic controller Douglas Hartman. In a damage suit he filed against the Transportation Department, he claimed that during one such session in 1992, he was groped around his genitals, called a wimp, humiliated by a chart on which women used drawings of penises to rate the men. He says he had tried to opt out of going through the gauntlet.
So I announced to them that I wouldn't take part, and I assumed my wishes would be honored, so I would enlist. And I walked in the door, and the door was shut behind me, and I was engulfed. There was really no way to move in or out.
They grabbed your legs. They grabbed you both in the front and in the rear below the waist. It was basically a no-holds-barred type situation.
One of Hartman's friends, Ken Kluge, says he went through the same session on the same day and witnessed the incident Hartman complained about.
I saw him basically put through the gauntlet against his will. Same touching, same grabbing, same verbal harassment.
Well, that was one side of the story. There is another.
When Doug Hartman came in and said that he walked in there and he was trapped and he was surrounded and groped and everything else, that did not happen. That did not happen.
Richard Spates is one of several other men present at that session who claim Douglas Hartman never passed through a gauntlet.
He immediately said, I don't want to participate, did not even get near the women.
And he walked to the left and went over and took a seat.
Basically blew the exercise off. And from the start of the class, he tried not to participate in anything.
What's going on? Well, many people believe the complaints were part of a preconceived plan to stop not just the gauntlet, which was discontinued after Hartman filed a work complaint 2 years ago, but the FAA's support of the training workshops, which Hartman characterized as mainly psychological experiments. Many minority employees we spoke with disagreed. They say the overall training worked, that office conditions improved, and that many co-workers and supervisors became more understanding of their discomfort.
For 3 days, they get just a smidgen of what it feels like, and yet we deal with it on a daily basis in the FAA and in the outside world, quiet as it's kept. You know, how can they possibly fix their lips to complain about dealing with a few minutes of discomfort or just hearing about my discomfort?
But too many elements of the training bordered on the types of insensitivity it was supposed to prevent, even though the FAA's own employees were helping conduct the training. Was it really necessary to display charts using drawings of penises?
There was nothing in this room that you couldn't find on the washroom wall in Chicago Center.
Except this was a training session, this wasn't a toilet.
What we're trying to simulate here is that stuff is just as offensive. And
what about characterizing the Bible as sexist? That too was reportedly brought into some sessions and was deeply disturbing to people who heard religions from Catholicism to Islam described as sexist.
I think it was referred to in this particular session as just the Bible being sexist, or many different religions being sexist, and how that got played out in our society also.
It's very easy to see how people would have been offended by that.
Well, Mr. Brown, we're very much aware that people will come in with these varying degrees of sensitivity to what happens.
But the FAA in Washington has heard enough and told 2020 this week it has stopped all training sessions conducted by the company responsible for the workshops.
We will not conduct any additional training courses provided by the company whom these allegations revolve around.
They spent millions of dollars on this program. If anything comes out of this, I would like to see a more efficient use made of the taxpayers' money. If you're going to do it, don't try to divide people. Don't humiliate people. Don't use abuse to fix abuse.
Bob, how widespread was this in the FAA?
Well, this was concentrated in the Chicago Center because they said they wanted to see what kind of impact it would have if a number of people in one place went through it. However, it's a general FAA policy throughout the agency. And they say that roughly 20,000 people went through sensitivity training of one kind or another, 3,000 last year. And they still stand behind the concept. They say it was under constant review, but it appears that in many instances it got out of hand and touched on people's most sensitive beliefs and sensitive areas and when they were trying to do the opposite.
However it went astray, it was set up to correct a very real wrong.
I think everybody agrees that there was a problem in the FAA, and on both sides. They say that they support sensitivity training, but they support it if it's done right.
Interesting. Thank you, Bob. We'll be right back.